if I had had someone from outside of my family walls who could have put out a hand and given me a lifeline, that would have changed everything. I'm wondering, so as I'm listening to this story, I'm wondering where the line was crossed between, because I'm imagining what some of our audience might be thinking, right? So like, okay, where was this just an agree to disagree? And then where was it not? And I'm curious if you have one sort of general example that you'd be able to give to speak to that, while of course maintaining the confidentiality for the family.
Yeah, I think the line is crossed when the parts of the people involved are so weighed down by the spiritual manipulation of the scriptures that there's no hope, and there's only a few ways out: run away or pass away, basically. So if that's, I don't know if that's as specific as I can get, but the idea is that when there's not an open line to communication, especially in family, back and forth, to have respectful dialogue, and that's not to say that you shouldn't submit to your parents or honor your father and mother. Absolutely, you should. But sometimes that honoring comes in saying, I'm not sure where the scripture says that. Can we have a conversation about that? Especially as kids get older. The parents disciple the kids, and my kids do that to me sometimes, where I'll say something, they'll be like, Dad, I don't think that's right. I don't think that's dishonoring. And so I think that's kind of where the line crosses, is when that leadership turns into this control to find conformity rather than discipleship. Now we're not actually leading our kids as believers. We're trying to get them to look a certain way to feed our own image, our facade that we've created and erected. And I think when that line is crossed, it is the duty of other faithful Christians to say, to step in and say, I don't think the discipleship that's happening here is beneficial for the church or for your family, and we need to step in. So I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it does. And I'm going to apply that to myself in order to give us an example that I know I can give, because it's my own story, so I can give it. So when I think back to, well, and let me double check this. I believe you're referencing teenagers, correct?
Yep.
At the time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I just want to clarify that too for everyone. We're not 5-6-year-olds. It would be just there'd be a different nuance to the conversation. Absolutely. Because we'd be engaging them differently, of course, at that age, versus teens who are attending youth group and have questions and are speaking and sharing, what their story is, what their suffering is looking like, and the need that they have. And is anyone going to step in and help us? And I resonate with what you shared about, okay, I have two options here. I can either run away, and what's that? Like, where am I going to go? How am I going to support myself? Is the church probably isn't going to be able to help me if they've already said no, and that's why I'm running away, because they're kind of, supporting the parents. So I can do that, which that can land in all sorts of awful places. We can talk about trafficking. We can talk about homelessness. There's a lot of stuff at risk there, of course. And then the other option of taking one's own life. So I remember when I was 17, I finally hit this breaking point of enough is enough. And I can't do this anymore. And I'm not going to. And I actually went to my father and had a conversation with him, which is so crazy to think about, because I'm just terrified of this man, right? And I mean, abusive in all of the ways. And I remember knocking on his door, which was like one of the most fearful things to do, and walking in, and I basically kind of let him have it, my version of that. I'm like shaking, and I'm, like 17-year-old Naomi learning how to be assertive for the first time with the scariest person she's ever known. and shaking and crying and like, you don't deserve to be called my father because you haven't been a dad. Like maybe some biological thing, but like this is how you've behaved and it's unacceptable. And I remember before I went in to have that conversation, I told my mom something had just happened. I can't remember what it was, but something had just happened where he had behaved horribly. And he had gone back in his room and I had told my mom, like, I'm going to either this stops now or I'm leaving. And I don't know if you'll see me again. And so we can hit that point of some people could be like, well, that's rebellious or that's whatever. I think anyone who knows my story would say differently. But there's a real capacity limit to what a heart, soul, mind, body can bear. And to choose to be in that environment any longer than one has to, all of a sudden it's like, I'm doing it to myself. And so what are my possible outs? Now, if I had left, I don't know what I would have done. I mean, I had definitely thought about taking my life before, for sure. And so this really resonates again with me. Like, what are my options? And so for anyone who's in that kind of situation, if I had had someone from outside of my family walls who could have put out a hand and given me a lifeline, that would have changed everything. And I just couldn't in good conscience say that you shouldn't have done that. Now, I don't know all the details and we're not going to get into all the details. And I don't know what mistakes were made. And I appreciate that you said, yeah, I mean, it wasn't like sin, not on the level of like that was sinful and you need to be terminated, but just like, yeah, I'm kind of living and learning and trying to figure this out. And I would have maybe said that differently, or I would have maybe gone about that in this way instead of that way, or whatever, had a conversation with this person first, or whatever those kind of, details look like, which matter. But the risk that you would have taken, I feel so thankful on behalf of, thinking about myself, that there's people who would do that there's people who would take the risk to give someone that lifeline and to share with them the truth of who Jesus really is. Well, yes, of course, we want to honor and respect our parents to the ability that we have to do so. I mean, I still had that conversation respectfully. I wasn't yelling at him. I wasn't, even when I say let him have it, I'm like, again, that was my version of letting him have it. It was me being honest. It was just me being honest. And so what tools do we have available to us? And I think part of the only reason I could do that was because I did have some outside voices from being in public school. Had I not been, I don't know if I ever would have done that at all. And so it's such a gift. And I'm grateful that you didn't turn away from it, even though it came at great risk for you. And ultimately, it did come at great cost to you.